The ballroom glittered with golden lights, chandeliers hanging like frozen stars above the guests. Music drifted through the air, soft piano notes mixing with the low hum of conversations. Business leaders, politicians, and celebrities filled the hall, each dressed in shining clothes and proud smiles. At the center of it all stood the CEO, a man whose empire stretched across continents. He lifted his glass of champagne, shaking hands, smiling for cameras, the picture of power and confidence. For him, this night was a celebration of success. For everyone else, it was a chance to be near the man who seemed untouchable. But in the corner of the room, almost invisible, stood a maid with a silver tray balanced in her hands. Her black uniform was plain, her hair tied back, her face unnoticed by the laughing crowd. She had worked in this company for years, walking quietly through its halls, cleaning, serving, never speaking out of turn. People rarely looked at her twice. Yet tonight, her eyes were sharper than anyone else's. As she moved through the ballroom, offering drinks, she suddenly stopped. Her eyes locked on the balcony above the hall. At first, she thought it was nothing, a shadow flickering, maybe from the chandelier lights. But then she saw it again. A hand. A pale hand gripping the railing, still and tense, like it was waiting. Her chest tightened. Nobody else noticed. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, cameras flashed. The orchestra played louder. The CEO raised his glass high, smiling as he prepared to give a speech. The maid's heart pounded. Something was wrong. She had seen enough in her years working behind the curtains to know when danger hid itself. She scanned the crowd, but everyone was too busy enjoying the moment. The security guards stood tall near the doors, their eyes on the guests, not on the balcony. No one looked up. No one saw what she saw. Her fingers tightened around the tray. She wanted to say something, to warn someone, but the voice inside her stopped her. What if I am wrong? What if they laugh? I am just a maid. Who would believe me? The CEO was surrounded by powerful people, men in suits, women in diamonds, leaders who thought themselves clever and strong. They believed they understood danger. But she had learned long ago that true danger never walked openly. It hid, it waited, it smiled. She turned slightly, pretending to adjust the tray, but her eyes never left the balcony. The hand disappeared. Her heart jumped. She felt a wave of fear wash through her body. She wanted to run upstairs, to see who was there, but her place was here. The rules were clear. Servants stayed out of sight, silent and obedient. Still, her instinct screamed. The CEO's deep voice filled the hall as he began to speak. He talked about the company's future, about growth and success, about hope and progress. Guests clapped at every sentence, their eyes glowing with admiration. But the maid barely heard him. Her eyes moved constantly, scanning the balcony, the doors, the shadows. She noticed little details others missed, a waiter's nervous glance toward the exits, a guest shifting uncomfortably in his chair, a faint reflection in the glass windows where no one should be standing. Her skin prickled. She had felt this kind of silence before, the silence before something breaks, before something falls. She remembered a story her grandmother once told her. When the birds go quiet, the storm is near. That was what this felt like. A storm no one else could see. She thought about the CEO. He was a man of pride, rich beyond measure, powerful in every room he entered. To him, she was invisible. He never looked at her directly, never asked her name. To him, she was only part of the background, another shadow moving through his empire. But tonight, she saw something he could not. Tonight, her invisible eyes might be the only shield he had. The music rose, violins singing through the hall. The crowd cheered, lifting their glasses again. The maid forced herself to move, stepping closer to the CEO, pretending to serve drinks. Her hands shook slightly, but she steadied them. If something happened, she wanted to be near. If danger struck, she would not let him stand alone. And then she noticed something else. Near the side door, a man in a dark suit slipped inside. He moved too quickly, his eyes too sharp, scanning the room not with wonder, but with calculation. The guards at the door barely glanced at him. He looked like any other guest, blending easily. But she saw it, the tension in his jaw, the way he kept one hand near his chest hidden under his jacket. Her breath caught. This was not normal. This was not safe. For a moment, fear paralyzed her. She thought of running, of leaving the building, of pretending she saw nothing. After all, she was just a maid. It was not her duty to protect men like the CEO. It was not her duty to risk her life for people who never even noticed her presence. But then she looked at the CEO again. He was smiling, confident, unaware. Around him, the guests trusted that nothing could touch them in this glittering hall of power. They were blind. And she knew, if she turned away, if she stayed silent, disaster would follow. Her decision burned inside her like fire. She would not run. She would not close her eyes. She would watch. She would listen. She would protect. The orchestra ended with a grand note, and the room filled with applause. The CEO raised his hands proudly. The guests roared with cheer. No one noticed the maid standing silently behind him, her eyes still locked on the shadows above, her heart whispering the warning that no one else could hear. Something was coming, and she was the only one ready to face it. The celebration grew louder as the night went on. Guests danced, laughter rose, and champagne glasses never stayed empty for long. The CEO moved from group to group, shaking hands, telling stories, enjoying the spotlight that always seemed to follow him. Cameras flashed. Every moment was recorded for tomorrow's news. But behind the glitter, the maid still felt the cold edge of danger. Her eyes never stopped scanning the room. Every step, every flicker of movement, every strange glance, it all pressed against her nerves. She could not forget the hand she had seen on the balcony, or the man in the suit who slipped in unnoticed. The music shifted into something softer, slower, a tune meant for dancing. Couples began stepping onto the polished floor, their shoes clicking in rhythm. For most people, this was a night of joy. For her, it was a night that would not let her breathe. She carried her tray to the kitchen door, pretending to refill drinks, but really giving herself a moment to think. "What am I doing?" she whispered in her mind. "Why am I watching so closely? I should leave. This is not my fight." But another voice answered inside her. "If not you, then who?" The kitchen was busy, cooks and staff rushing to keep the feast flowing. She slipped into the narrow hallway behind the ballroom. It was darker here, the music muffled by walls. As she walked quietly, she froze again. A sound. A whisper. Not words she could understand, but low voices, two men talking quickly. She held her breath, pressing herself against the wall. The voices came from the stairway that led up to the balcony. Her heart hammered. Slowly, she leaned closer. "He doesn't know," one voice said, rough and cold. "Wait for the signal," another replied. "Not yet." Her skin crawled. They were planning something. Something against the CEO. She wanted to hear more, but a footstep echoed, and she stepped back fast, nearly dropping her tray. If they found her here, alone, they would know she had heard. She slipped into the shadows, heart racing. For a moment, she thought she saw one of them glance her way. A tall figure in black turned slightly, his face half hidden. She ducked quickly, pretending to adjust her tray, then walked back toward the ballroom as if nothing had happened. But inside, her fear grew heavier. When she re-entered the ballroom, the warmth of the lights and music felt fake, like a thin curtain hiding something sharp and deadly. The guests smiled, laughed, clapped for the dancers, unaware of the danger breathing just above them. She glanced at the CEO. He was laughing loudly, one arm around an old friend, the picture of a man who believed nothing could touch him. But she knew better now. As she moved closer, he finally noticed her for the first time that evening. More champagne," he said, not even looking at her face, only at the glass she carried. He took it and turned away before she could open her mouth. She almost spoke, almost told him, but her voice stuck in her throat. What would she say? That she had seen shadows? That she had heard whispers in the dark? He would laugh, wave her away. A maid's warning would mean nothing to a man like him. She swallowed hard and stayed silent. But her eyes stayed sharp. The man in the dark suit was still in the crowd. She tracked him carefully, watching how he moved. He never laughed, never joined the dances. He kept shifting places, standing where he could see the CEO. And then, for just a second, his eyes met hers. It was like ice stabbing through her chest. He knew she was watching him. His lips curled into the faintest smile, then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. She wanted to follow, but her feet felt heavy. Her body shook. She realized then it was not only the CEO who was in danger. She was in danger too. She was not invisible anymore. The orchestra finished the song, and the room clapped. The CEO lifted his glass again. To the future, he declared, his voice echoing. Everyone cheered, the hall ringing with sound. But above, in the balcony shadows, she thought she saw the faint glimmer of metal. Her breath caught. A gun? A knife? She could not be sure, but she felt it. Time was running out. She turned, rushing toward the side hall, trying to find security, but then stopped. What if they did not believe her? What if, by the time they checked, it was too late? Her mind raced. She had two choices: stay silent and hope she was wrong, or act now and risk everything. She clenched her fists. Her life had been filled with silence, with being overlooked, with obeying rules that kept her small. But tonight, something inside her changed. If she did nothing, blood would stain the ballroom floor. She could not allow it. She placed the tray on a table, straightened her back, and took a deep breath. Her fear was still there, but under it a fire burned. The storm her grandmother had warned of, it was here. And she was the only one who could stop it. The music swelled again, filling the ballroom with light-hearted rhythm. Guests clapped, waiters hurried with trays of wine, and the CEO stood proudly at the center, glowing under the chandeliers. To everyone else, this was a perfect night. But to the maid, every sound felt sharper, every shadow deeper. She kept glancing toward the balcony, expecting movement, expecting something to break the false peace. She wasn't wrong. A sudden flicker of light caught her eye. Not the glitter of jewelry or a camera flash. This was sharper, metallic. She froze, her breath stuck in her chest. The faint gleam came from the balcony again. Her heart pounded so loud, she thought others would hear it. She tried to call out, but her voice failed. The music drowned everything. Then it happened. A small, sharp sound cracked through the music, so quiet most guests missed it, but she didn't. Something hissed, and a glass of champagne shattered in the CEO's hand. He blinked, confused, staring at the broken glass dripping golden liquid across his sleeve. For a second, everyone laughed, thinking it was an accident. But the maid knew. That was no accident. That was the first move. She gasped and turned toward the balcony. She saw a figure melting back into the shadows. He had missed.
Just barely.
The shot was too quiet to be a normal gun, something silenced, hidden. She trembled, her whole body shaking. They had really tried to kill him. No one else noticed. The guests clapped again, cheering as the CEO waved off the broken glass with a forced smile. No harm done, he laughed, raising another glass someone handed him. To the crowd, it was nothing more than a clumsy slip. But her eyes widened. They were blind. All of them. She rushed to the side, pretending to refill her tray, but really keeping her view fixed on the upper balcony. She expected another strike, another gleam of metal. But for the moment the shadows stayed still. Then she realized something far worse. If the shooter had missed, they would try again. And next time, they would not miss. The maid's hands shook so badly, she almost dropped the tray. Her eyes searched for security. There were guards near the doors, dressed in black suits, earpieces in their ears. But they stood calm, unaware, watching only the guests, not the danger above. She wanted to scream, to point, but fear glued her mouth shut. If she was wrong, they would laugh, dismiss her, maybe even fire her. But she was not wrong. She knew. As she tried to think, someone brushed past her. She turned quickly and saw him. The man in the dark suit, the one who had smiled at her before. He was closer now, too close. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, her blood ran cold. He knew she had seen the attempt. He knew she was aware. His lips barely moved, but she caught it, a whisper. "Stay quiet." Her chest tightened. She almost dropped her tray. She wanted to step back, but her feet would not move. He walked past her, calm, blending into the crowd again. But his warning burned in her ears. "Stay quiet." She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. Fear told her to obey, to keep her head down, pretend she saw nothing. But another voice rose inside her, fierce and trembling. "If you stay quiet, he dies." The orchestra struck a louder note, and the CEO raised his glass again, ready to give another speech. The crowd gathered closer, cheering him on. She knew this was the moment the killers were waiting for. She could not let it happen. Her eyes darted around the room, desperate for anything she could use. Then she saw it, a tall candelabra standing near the edge of the balcony stairs. If she caused a distraction, even a small one, it might break the plan. She tightened her grip on the tray, her mind racing. The CEO began to speak, his deep voice echoing. "Tonight we celebrate not just our company's success, but the bright future." She acted. With one sudden push, she stumbled forward, knocking the candelabra. It crashed to the floor with a deafening clang. Flames flickered dangerously as candles scattered. Guests screamed and backed away. Guards rushed forward. The music stopped. The entire room's attention shifted to the fallen candles. People shouted for water, for cloths. The chaos spread like fire. And in that chaos, she looked back up at the balcony. The shadow was gone. Her chest heaved. She had done it. She had broken their moment. She had bought the CEO a little more time. But she knew it wasn't over. The killers had melted away into the dark. They would strike again. As the guards put out the flames and the guests returned to nervous chatter, the CEO laughed it off again, calling for calm. He had no idea his life had just been saved twice. The maid stood in the corner, trembling, sweat dripping down her back. She had drawn attention to herself now. The killers would not forgive her for this. She was no longer a silent maid in the background. She was part of the game, and she had just made her first move. The ballroom buzzed with nervous voices. Guests whispered about the fallen candles, fanning themselves as if the smoke still lingered. Some laughed uneasily, saying it was only an accident. But in the corner, the maid stood stiff, her hands tight around the tray. She knew better. That noise, that flicker of metal, the broken champagne glass, none of it had been chance. The CEO moved across the floor, smiling, shaking hands, pretending all was normal. He didn't see the danger. He didn't notice the shadows watching him. She wanted to shout, to warn him, but her throat locked. Who would believe her? To them, she was only a maid. Invisible. Forgettable. She set her tray down, her breath shallow. Then she saw movement near the far doors. The man in the dark suit, the one who had whispered "stay quiet," was leaving. He walked calmly, weaving through the crowd, his hand brushing against his jacket, as if hiding something inside. Her stomach twisted. If he slipped away now, he would return with another plan. Maybe not tonight, but soon. And then the CEO would not be lucky. For a moment she hesitated. She could turn away, pretend none of this was hers to carry. But then she remembered the sound of the glass shattering in the CEO's hand. If the bullet had landed an inch higher, he would be lying dead on the floor. Her heart pounded. She could not let the man escape. She pulled off her apron and slipped between the guests. No one noticed her leave. The music had started again, covering her footsteps as she hurried through the side hall after him. The corridor outside the ballroom was dim and quiet. Only the hum of lights filled the silence. She caught a glimpse of the man turning the corner, his pace faster now. He knew she was behind him. Her palms grew wet with sweat. What was she doing? She had no weapon, no training. Only fear and instinct guided her. But she could not stop. She followed. The hall stretched into a service wing, metal doors, storage rooms, the faint smell of polish and dust. He moved quickly, glancing back once. Their eyes met for the briefest second. Cold. Calculating. Then he turned again, slipping into a stairwell. She pressed her back to the wall, her chest rising and falling. She had two choices. Stop now and remain safe, or follow him into the unknown. Her legs moved before her mind decided. She pushed the stairwell door and slipped inside. The echo of his footsteps clattered downward. She followed, careful, each step heavier than the last. The air grew colder, damp, carrying the faint scent of underground halls. She realized they were heading toward the parking levels. He wasn't fleeing. He was meeting someone. At the bottom, she crouched by the wall, peeking through the crack of the door. The underground parking garage stretched wide, lined with black cars. In the far corner, a van waited. Its headlights blinked once, like a signal. The man walked toward it. The back door opened. Another figure stepped out, a woman this time, sharp suit, short hair, eyes like steel. They spoke in low tones she couldn't hear, but she saw the exchange. The man handed her something small and metallic. A weapon. Her stomach dropped. They were preparing for another attempt. She pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from gasping. The woman glanced around, scanning the garage. For a terrifying second, the maid thought she had been spotted. But the shadows held her. She stayed still, silent. The woman's voice carried faintly now. He'll give his closing speech in 20 minutes. That's when we finish it. The maid's blood turned to ice. They were not done. They would strike before the night ended. The woman slipped the weapon into a bag, then looked at the man. Make sure no one interferes. Her heart thudded. She was the interference. The van door slammed shut. The engine growled. Slowly it rolled deeper into the garage, out of sight. The man remained behind, scanning the area. She ducked lower, praying the shadows covered her. But then a noise betrayed her. A tray she had carried earlier, now leaning against the wall near the stairwell, slipped and clattered to the floor. The man's head snapped toward her. His eyes narrowed. Her breath caught. She ran. Her shoes slapped against the concrete, echoing like gunfire. She dashed back into the stairwell, her lungs burning. Behind her, the sound of pursuit grew louder. He was fast. Too fast. Up the stairs she flew, 2 steps at a time. Her heart hammered in her ears. She burst through the door into another corridor, nearly crashing into a startled waiter. She pushed past, her voice finally breaking free. Help! Someone's chasing me. But when the waiter looked, the corridor was empty. The man had vanished into the shadows again. Her knees weakened. She leaned against the wall, gasping, trembling. She had seen too much. She knew too much. And now they knew she was a threat. The ballroom music still played faintly down the hall, as if nothing had changed. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, the CEO's voice rose in cheer. But everything had changed. The maid pressed her hand to her chest, forcing herself to breathe. She had discovered their plan. They would strike during his closing speech. She had only minutes to act. And she was utterly alone. The maid's hands shook as she pushed herself away from the wall. Her lungs still burned from running, but she forced her body to move. The killers were planning to strike in less than 20 minutes. Every second mattered. She hurried toward the ballroom, but halfway down the corridor, she froze. A shadow shifted at the far end. The man in the dark suit. He stood still, his posture calm, his eyes fixed on her. Her throat dried. He had been waiting. Slowly, he began to walk forward. Not rushing, not chasing. Just steady steps, like a predator certain the prey had nowhere to run. She turned and bolted the other way. Her shoes pounded against the floor, her chest tight with panic. She darted into a side passage, pushing through a heavy service door. The air changed, colder, filled with the faint smell of oil and iron. She realized too late where she had run. The storage wing. The door slammed shut behind her with a metallic echo. She was trapped. Rows of shelves stretched across the room, stacked with cleaning supplies, folded linens, silver trays. The fluorescent lights buzzed weakly overhead, casting long shadows between the aisles. She crouched low, forcing herself to breathe quietly. The door creaked open. His footsteps entered. Slow. Careful. The sound of a hunter who had done this many times before. Do you know what happens, his voice echoed softly, when you see too much? Her hands gripped the edge of a shelf. Fear rose like fire inside her, but she stayed silent. He moved closer, his shoes brushing against the tiled floor. Then silence. He was listening for her. She inched backward, keeping her body low, her heart hammering so loud she feared he would hear it. Then another sound. A second door opening on the far side of the room. Her blood turned cold. The woman in the suit had joined him. Now there were two. Their voices drifted between the shelves. She saw us, the woman said. She heard too much, the man replied. Then finish it. Quickly. Her body trembled. She pressed herself against the shelf, closing her eyes for a moment. The ballroom was just above them. The CEO was laughing, drinking, completely unaware. She had to survive. She had to warn him. A metallic clang echoed as the man knocked a tray off a shelf, testing for movement. She bit her lip to keep from gasping. They were hunting her like an animal. Her mind raced. What did she have? Only her hands, her fear, her will. And one more thing. A broken champagne glass still tucked into her pocket from earlier when she had cleaned the floor. Its sharp edge pressed against her leg. She pulled it out, gripping it tight. A shadow stretched near her feet. Someone was close. Too close. She moved. Fast. She darted between shelves, pushing a cart of bottles into the man's path. The bottles crashed to the floor, shattering in an explosion of glass and liquid. He cursed, stumbling back. Over here, he shouted. The woman spun toward the noise, but the maid slipped the other way, rushing toward the far door. Her feet flew, her breath harsh in her throat. She slammed against the handle. Locked. Her stomach dropped. Behind her, footsteps closed in. The woman's voice was sharp. She's cornered. End it. The maid's mind screamed for escape. She scanned the room, desperate. Then she saw it, an air vent near the floor, its cover loose. On shaking hands and knees, she shoved the cover aside and squeezed inside just as the woman's shadow fell over the spot. The vent was tight, the air stale and dusty. Her elbows scraped, her knees burned as she crawled forward. The killer's voices echoed faintly behind her, distorted by the metal. She can't go far. We'll find her, and then we'll deal with him. The maid forced herself deeper into the vent, ignoring the dust clogging her lungs. The passage turned upward. She climbed, gripping the sides, pulling herself higher. Every muscle screamed, but she refused to stop. At last, the vent opened into a dark balcony above the ballroom. She dragged herself out, her body trembling with exhaustion. Below, the guests cheered. The CEO stood at the center, raising his glass for a toast. The killer's plan was seconds away. She staggered to her feet, her clothes dirty, her face streaked with sweat. Her eyes scanned the room below. The woman in the suit had already slipped inside, blending with the guests. She held a bag close, her hand dipping toward it. The maid's pulse thundered. She had to act now. She leaned over the railing, shouting with all the strength in her chest. Stop her. She has a weapon. Every head turned. The music crashed to silence. The woman froze, her hand inside the bag. For one breathless moment, no one moved. Then chaos exploded. Security rushed forward. Guests screamed. The CEO ducked as the woman pulled a small black pistol from the bag. She fired once, the shot echoing like thunder. The maid dropped flat, the sound ringing in her ears. When she looked again, the room was a storm of shouting bodies, overturned chairs, and guards swarming the woman. The gun clattered across the floor. The CEO was alive. For now. But the maid knew it wasn't over. The man in the dark suit was still out there, watching, waiting, and she had just painted a target on herself. The ballroom was still shaking from the gunshot. Guests screamed, glasses shattered, and the music had long since died. Guards forced the woman in the suit to the ground, twisting her arms behind her back. The pistol slid across the floor, stopping at the feet of a frightened waiter. The CEO stood frozen, his chest heaving. He stared at the chaos, pale as if the ground itself had betrayed him. But the maid knew it wasn't finished. Her eyes darted across the room. One assassin was caught, yes, but the other, him, the man in the dark suit, was still free. She scanned the guests, her breath tight. Every corner of the room seemed dangerous. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, faces blurred by panic. Then she saw him. He had changed clothes. He was no longer in his black suit, but in a waiter's white jacket. His hair was slicked back differently, his tie loose. But his eyes, sharp, cold, merciless, gave him away. He was moving closer to the CEO. Step by step, careful, unnoticed. The maid's pulse pounded so loudly she thought the whole hall could hear it. She wanted to scream, to point him out, but her voice caught. Would anyone believe her a second time? Already, people were glaring at her from the balcony, whispering. Some thought she was mad, that she had caused the panic. If she shouted now, maybe security would grab the wrong person. Maybe chaos would give him the chance to strike. She had no proof. Only her eyes. Only her heart that screamed danger. The man smiled faintly as he reached for a silver tray on a nearby table. The tray carried only champagne flutes, but beneath the cloth, she saw the glint of something else. A knife. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up. She rushed down the stairs from the balcony, weaving through the fleeing guests. Her breath came in gasps, her chest aching, but she didn't slow. The man was just steps away from the CEO now. The guards were still wrestling with the woman, distracted. No one noticed him. The maid lunged forward. "Stop," she screamed. Her voice cut through the chaos. Heads turned. The man's eyes narrowed. He dropped the tray. The knife flashed in his hand. The CEO finally saw him. His face drained of color. Everything happened in seconds. The man lunged, the blade gleaming. The maid threw herself in front of the CEO. The knife sliced across her arm, burning pain exploding through her body. She gasped, but her grip on his wrist was iron. The two of them struggled, their bodies crashing against the banquet table. Plates and glasses toppled, smashing onto the floor. Guests shrieked and scrambled out of the way. The man's strength was terrifying. His eyes were cold, focused only on the kill. The maid's arms trembled as she held the knife back, the metal edge inching closer and closer to her throat. The CEO finally moved. With shaking hands, he grabbed a bottle from the table and smashed it against the man's head. The man staggered, dazed. The maid seized the moment, twisting the knife free from his grip. It clattered to the ground. Guards swarmed at last, tackling him to the floor. He fought like an animal, his fists striking, his body twisting, but they held him down. Handcuffs clicked shut. His furious eyes burned holes through the maid as they dragged him away. Silence fell again. The guests stared. Some whispered in disbelief. Others simply watched, frozen. The CEO looked at the maid. His eyes were wide, his face pale. But there was something else there now, something softer. Gratitude. Shock. Maybe even guilt. She clutched her bleeding arm, breathing heavily. Sweat and tears blurred her vision, but she stood tall. She had saved him. Twice. The CEO stepped closer. For a moment, it seemed like he wanted to speak, but no words came. His throat tightened, his lips trembled. She lowered her eyes. They wanted you dead. I couldn't let it happen. His hand rose halfway, as if to touch her shoulder, then stopped. Emotion thickened his voice when he finally whispered, "Why? You risked your life. You could have run." Her reply was simple. "Because I am loyal. Because I believe your life matters." The words struck him like a blow. His chest tightened. No one had spoken to him like that in years. To most people, he was just money, power, a trophy. But to her, he was simply human. His eyes filled with tears he could no longer hold back. He turned away for a moment, covering his face with his hand. When he looked back, his voice was raw. "You saved me, and I don't even know your name." She gave a small, Tired smile. I am just a maid, sir. The guards led the captured man and woman out of the hall. Guests slowly began to breathe again, whispering in relief. But the CEO's mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop staring at her, the woman who had seen the danger no one else had. The woman who had saved his life at the cost of her own blood. And deep inside, he knew this was not the end. There were still questions. Who sent the killers?
Why?
How had she spotted them when no one else did? But for now, one truth burned brighter than all the rest. Without her, he would be dead.